ToirneachKoro. Am I reading that right? I feel like I'm reading that wrong. Anyway, there's a user on Reddit that asks, 1. Uh, are Mage and Archer at least decent in the game? Because I keep hearing everything about chains. And second, they enjoy life skills and that they give stats, but are they needed or can some of them be ignored? Okay, so let's answer the second question first because I think it's easy to answer. As far as life talents go, they give a pretty incredible amount of stats to kind of beef up what you already have in combat, right? So even though they're not necessary to like do a lot more damage, it's kind of like if you're building up, right? And you need some cement to hold the building together, right? You can have like these really, really strong bricks to lay the foundation with, but unless you have the cement to stick them together, it's not really gonna like hold up well if there's a strong force that comes and hits at you, right? So like if you're doing a bunch of archery but you don't have the dex life skills, you're gonna have a good amount of damage, but a second something that has high resistances comes up, all that damage just does nothing. Like you're not going to be able to do very much at all. And so you'll hit like this brick, not quite like the building metaphor now, but like you'll hit a brick wall where you're going, in order to get past that point and continue to do harder content, you're going to need to do life skills. And it's all kind of relative because depending on what your damage source is, you're only going to need to do life skills for that damage source. So if you're in archery, you need to do dex skills. If you're using warrior, you're going to need to do strength skills like carpentry. So like if you're using mostly mage, you're going to need int life skills. You just want to max out that stat, right? You want to get as far into that stat as you can to kind of beef up the damage you already have. Now, as far as mage, is mage relevant? Is mage decent? Well, you can get away with 2 different mage builds. So the first one being fusion bolt build. And this does quite a bit of damage. I don't have casting speed on this wand, but I figure I'd just show it. Okay, so fusion bolt is one build that you can do. It does a decent amount of damage. It's not terribly easy to build into. You kind of need a lot of specific items to do it, and I don't think I have that much time to go over it, but I do have a video on mage gear. If you want to check that out, that'll point you in the right direction as far as that goes. So fusion bolt is one build that you can do for mage, and the other build is typically hailstorm. And hailstorm is a whale of a beast. A lot of the utility of it comes from basically reforges. You got to get that hailstorm range reforge. But other than that, like it's pretty cheap to build into, and then gets more expensive the farther you go. And what I mean by that is like, let me see here. I'm in combat. Let me get out of combat. But in order to maximize your hailstorm damage, once you've already got your staff and your staff is good to go, the next step up is going to be expensive because you're going to be looking for rosemary gloves, because that increases your ice magic damage by 15%. You're eking out those little numbers at the top, right? It's the difference between like doing 20,000 and 21,000 and 22,000. You know, like you're progressively increasing up in damage, right? And some of that is getting like instead of step 5, you need step 6 on your weapon. Instead of step 6, maybe step 7. You know, and that's how you get a lot of those like small increases that add up. Um, as far as like stabs go, they're not like terribly expensive to get like even a decent Celtic Druid staff. They're not hard. But if you're talking about like some of the other gear, like the accessories you'll need, let me just see if it's still on the market here. There was a Eerie Spooky, yeah, Eerie Spooky for 300 million. This is the kind of price tag that you're paying for getting those increases once you get to that point. You know, once you've got your gear all sorted out, like now you're looking at like maximizing how much you can do. Like 300 million is like chump change at this point, you know, for increasing pieces of gear, because a lot of these enchants are rare. They don't come by that often. So getting yourself a pair of those is going to be hard, but the damage numbers are there. Right? It's not bad. Like even in tech missions, I can do like a lot of damage with my hailstorm. So archery, uh, archery is another one where it's kind of the same deal, except archery's viable kind of at different spots compared to mage. And what I mean by that is like mage, generally you can get by pretty early as a mage, but very early on as an archer you're going to really struggle, and you're going to be tested on your knowledge of positioning and mechanics and combat. A lot of what you're going to be doing is going to tie very, very closely with close combat, because you're not going to be able to one-shot mobs, and you're not going to be fighting things that are going to let you get off easy if you shoot them. There's even some mobs where if you aim at them, they'll start to aggro and run at you. So you're going to be looking at doing a lot of like windmill, counterattack, that sort of thing. And so it kind of gets a little bit murky and muddy when you're doing archery, whereas with mage I feel like you have ways to compensate for that, with like different like casting speed or chain casting, where you can get a bunch of burst damage very, very early on, whereas with archery you're not going to have that until you get to the very end. But once you get there, it can end up about the same, a little bit better than mage on damage. But that's after you've like fully invested. I believe I have another video talking about archery gear as far as like the weapon goes. But I haven't really talked about like what sort of equipment set you'd need for that. And primarily, like in order to get your damage numbers up, you want Bohemian, because it adds like a magnum shot damage enhancement. And essentially, to follow that tune, you're kind of going to want magnum shot damage reforge on your Bohemian gloves. You just want max damage on everything. You want magnum shot 3 on both of your accessories, you know, like, and that's how you get a lot of the damage for archery. But that's like way down the road. You don't even need to worry about that getting into the game. Like when you're getting into the game, a lot of it's like, if I can't kill this in one shot, how am I going to deal with the consequences of firing at it? Or rather, like, if I fire at it and hit it, how do I deal with the or if I fire at it and miss, how do I deal with the consequences, you know? Like a lot of archery is playing the consequences in your mind and kind of dancing around combat a bit more. I feel like with mage you have a lot of burst damage, so you're not doing that as much. But once you get into that gear set and once you get into it, like archery and mage kind of are a lot of like in that they allow you to have this big burst of damage, and there's this vulnerability to it that you can kind of make up for by the way that you play them. So there's a lot of strategizing in them, and that's kind of the appeal of those two skill sets. And the reason, and this is like way into the video, I'm sorry this is taking so long, but the reason that chains is talked about a lot is because of the way the skills function, the way that they're set up to work. So if we look at Magnum Shot here, Magnum Shot has a percentage damage, but ranged attack, like your basic ranged attack, is just a flat number, right? It's just a flat damage number. It's this to this is what increase you're getting. Now, if we look at chains, here's the difference. All of your skills are a percentage of your base damage, right? Every single one of them. So rather than having a flat number that they deal, like how much damage they add to your base damage, chains will do a percentage. So the higher your base damage, the higher the damage goes, which means it scales incredibly well, right? It has some of the highest damage multipliers in the game. And it pairs well with, all right, how much damage do you have now? Well, let's do like 800% of that as like how much you're going to deal to the enemy. You know, like I don't even know. Is it 800? It's 850 at rank 1, you know. But it just like it allows you to very easily cheat gear to get the damages. You don't need gear to do damage with chains, right? And additionally, it's very, very easy to get the gear for chains. It doesn't require very much. There's no like reforgers that are absolutely necessary. There's things that are good for chains, don't get me wrong. One of the most important being a Dorsha hat. There's a Dorsha Mastery, Dorsha Skill Damage line for reforgers on hats that increases the damage that you deal by 1% per level. You know, like again, that's like eking out like the extra couple thousand at the end, but to get to like 10,000 damage on chains is ridiculously easy compared to other talents. You know, like in order to get 10,000 damage on archery, you're gonna have to get like Celtic Royal Expo and have like a good reforge on it and have like special arrows, and you're gonna need to have the Bohemian set and like have all your skills at least rank 1. You know, like there's a lot of investment, whereas with chains, like you can get like whatever chain you find laying around on the ground in a dungeon somewhere and have like a decent amount of dexterity, and you're gonna crit for 10k every once in a while. You know, like it's not hard. And then like it's just max damage and chance, what you want for most of your stuff anyway, so you're not building out of the normal in order to get your chain damage up. Like you can even have your Bohemian set and just have the max damage and chance. In fact, here, let me just go ahead and try that, right? All right, so this is my Bohemian set. I don't have anything for chains on this, and I'm still doing like 10k base, 12k. Yeah, I'm still hitting around the same that I did before. This is no like chain reforges whatsoever. Nothing. Right? It doesn't take much. It's all stats behind this. Just want max damage, right? So it's kind of like it's just the easy way out, basically. It's kind of beginner friendly because the other advantage is chains don't miss. Archery does. So if I want to hit a target, I can hit a target. You know, you're not wondering about, all right, is my positioning good? Is my positioning bad? Because you can just easily reposition. Like chains fixes all of the worries that you have with archery. It's just easy, you know. So that's why you hear a lot about it, is because it's very, very simplified in terms of combat. It gives you a lot of invulnerability frames as well. Like when I'm using chain sweep, right? I'm invulnerable to a lot of things while I'm using chain sweep. It can help me dodge attacks. It can stop me from being knocked back. Spinning slasher, another one. Now I can't be knocked back. I'm gonna be here for a minute. You know, like you can very easily navigate combat when you have so many different things that allow you to avoid taking damage or avoid being knocked back or moved out of position. You know, like chains just as a kit is very, very solid and built into itself. You don't have to have all of these questions about positioning and what am I going to do next and all this when you have a very, like, almost brain dead, easy to do thing that has some very high mechanical skill um, later on. Like, yeah, you can get those like frame perfect anchor rushes to dodge thunder strikes, but early on in the game, even if you don't have mechanical knowledge, you could still like move while being hit. Like it's not. I don't know. There's skill expression in it, but it's also fairly brain dead early on, and that's good when you're still trying to learn the basic controls of the game, still trying to learn how the game kind of functions, what the combat, like the flow of combat is. Not having to worry about what you're doing with your skills is very good for learning the rest of the game, Whereas with archery, you're kind of like throwing it on hard mode immediately. Like, let's go bare bones, and if I mess up, I'm dead. Like there's not very much I can do about it. Like early on, that's a lot of how archery feels. It may not be exactly that way because there's a lot of stuff you can do, but like when you're still getting used to it and you're not noticing like, oh, I should probably load counterattack now, chains kind of helps you get away with it, where archery you're going to get severely punished for that. So I just think that's why people talk about chains a lot. um, some other stuff I would probably mention outside of chains, archery, and mage, alchemy for sure. uh, I love alchemy a lot, and it's another one of those where you need gear to do the damage, just like archery is. But once you get there, like alchemy will keep up with all the rest, and in some cases, far exceed any of their limits. You know, like I can do much more damage with water cannon than I can with most of my other skill sets, just like raw damage, raw power. You know, but this is after a lot of investment. It's not easy to get to this point in alchemy, but it's another one that plays kind of like that, but it has a lot of utility at the same time, where you're not getting punished for mistakes as easily as archery does. So while you're building up your skill set, you're also able to use it as utility while you do damage with another source. And something neat I like to do sometimes is switch out for a wand with an alchemy cylinder. So now you can kind of have the best of both worlds, where you have a little bit of alchemy damage, a little bit of utility. You can use Sandburst and Wind Blast and Life Drain, but also you have the burst damage of like Chaincast Firebolt. So that kind of helps mages out, and it can help archers out as well. For the same reasons, because you have Sandblast and Wind Blast and all this stuff to kind of keep your distance from your enemy, keep them at bay, kind of lock them down. You have Shock that can help you keep a distance, Raincast that helps you control aggro, and at the same time you can use your archery as damage set. And another one that I would tag along this is Ninja. Okay, Alchemy and Ninja I think are the utility sets of all the talents, and they kind of give you answers or tools for different situations that other talents don't. So if you're an archer or a mage, another thing that's going to be really useful for you is going to be like, uh, what is this even called? Explosive kunai. I always forget what the name of it is. I just throw them down, and it really helps me control different situations, but also Shadowbind. Shadowbind is incredibly helpful with Hailstorm because it gives you time to set up. And not only does it give you time to set up, but it means that the enemies that you hit aren't going to be knocked back. And that's the same for Magnum Shot, but you kind of want them to be knocked back. So more so the Explosive Kunai for archery. But this whole thing allows you to like buy time for yourself and make combat easier. So I really like combining Ninja or Alchemy with the Archer and Mage, especially early on. They don't use the same stats for damage Like strength and will is very different from dex or from intelligence, right? So your ninja might not do a lot of damage, but you can use the skills for the utility purpose of it. So and you don't even have to like rank them up very much, you know. Like you can keep them at a pretty low rank and save your AP, but just like have those tools available to you as like your secondary weapon to kind of help yourself get a head start, and that way you can make up for the difference between archery or mage versus chains, where chains is kind of all inclusive in its own. It helps you make up for your mistakes, and you don't really have to know the game very well. Whereas with archery and mage, you kind of, especially early on, you need that little bit of help to navigate combat when you're still trying to learn the base, like the ins and outs of everything. So hopefully that maybe answers both of your questions. I know I went a little bit ranty, but I figure more information is probably better for you at this point, and maybe give you an idea of what's possible. You know, like all of these things can do a lot of damage. It really depends on how much you're wanting to invest in it, how much time you spend on it. I've been playing the game for years now. I joined Alexina like the day after the servers launched. So it's been a while for me, and I've heavily invested in basically all of my skill sets. Uh, so a lot of these are like some inflated numbers that it'll take you a very long time to see and a lot of investment for. But just know like basically every talent has some viability the further you go into it. The more you invest into a thing, the more you get out of it, kind of deal. So don't be afraid to kind of choose whatever talent you're interested in and running with it. Um, these are just my thoughts on where they're at right now, as it stands with like all the content in the game that you can run. I think everything's a little bit viable, but there's some stuff you can do to kind of help yourself at different stages in the game before you have like made the investment in to make them good, you know. So, all right, with that, I'm gonna go back to fishing. I'll see you in the next one, guys.